Jesus didn't tell you to oppress and misuse and mistreat gay people. He told you to love ye one another.
Jesus says plenty about judging, lots and lots about judging, says zero about homosexuality.
From a faith perspective, I look at the Sisters of St. Joseph that were founded in the 17th century with a mission of love of God and neighbor without distinction.
It's one thing for religion to believe that things are a certain way. It's another thing for them to then dictate everybody else, like how things are done.
The vows that we made are vows that we made before God and before our friends and family, and mean something to us even though the state says it's not legitimate.
When I first came out, I had a little atheist stage where I was like, I just can't believe in God because everyone at my church hates me and my parents hate me, but I've come to terms with it and realized that God still loves me no matter what anyone says, and they're not the people who could speak for God. God is the person who speaks for himself.
There are many teachings in Judaism about how we treat people, and rather than jumping to Leviticus, start at the very beginning of the story of creation. Start with how God created humanity, and start with the story about creation and the first problem in the world. And the Torah says that the first problem in the world is that it's not good for humankind to be alone. Everything that gets created is good. God created light and darkness, and it was good. God created the first day, and it was good. The second day, and it was good. But it's not good for people to be alone. And the message there is the same for straight people as it is for gay people. People shouldn't be alone.
Yeah, the scripture can be read in support of bigotry in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But not so, it seems to me, with the way the Gospels present Jesus.
I'm on board with a literal reading of the Bible. I really am. And I think the literal text itself supports an inclusive understanding of it. Like we talked about this morning, the word toeva, the Hebrew word that's used in Leviticus, does not mean abomination. It means taboo. It has to do with idolatry. That's the literal meaning of the word. That's not me deciding that we've moved past Leviticus or me taking some sort of interpretation. That's the literal meaning of the word. If we want to use God language, whatever God likes, it has to be diversity. You know, we look at the infinity practically of animal species and of beauty and colors and nature and of sexual variation and of gender variation in nature, that is to say in non-human animals and stuff. So clearly diversity is part of what God wants, if we wanted to use that language.
A theme I see in Scripture is that God is always at work on the margins, and over again in Scripture you see God doing unexpected things, and rather than God, working through the powerful elites of society, God works through the underdogs. And so you have David and Goliath, and you have Jesus being born in a manger, and you have, Abraham called out of Ur of the Chaldeans, this no man's land, this nobody called out of a no man's land to be the father of a great nation. And it's story after story, and then when Mary finds out she's going to give birth to Jesus, she sings the Magnificat, which is about God bringing the mighty down from their thrones and lifting up the lowly. And it's over and over again, it's God upending our expectations and turning things on their head. And so that's a value that it's a lens that I see the world through as a Christian. And for me, this is just another one of those, it's so clear how I as a Christian should feel about this issue.
Muslim doctrine is incredibly wide and diverse. So for example, the number one poet, the number one purchased poet in America today is, I think, a 13th century Muslim named Rumi. Rumi is a Muslim. People will be, people need to bear that in mind, and his poetry is, it's cosmic, it's inspirational, it's about love, connection, humanity, and it inspires Americans and people of all faiths and all colors and all cultures. And on the other side, on the extreme other end, you have these fundamentalist puritanical types who want to judge everybody and tell everybody what they need to be doing and are willing, in some cases, to kill you if you don't do it their way. Now, you got the same paradigm in Christianity and in Judaism and in Hinduism and in Buddhism. Now, because of 9/11, people today have sort of stereotyped Islam to be more associated with those doctrinaire fundamentalist types. Now, how does this square with what I've ever been with Islam? Again, it depends on whose understanding of Islam you want to apply. Do you want to apply Osama bin Laden's understanding? Well, he would completely and emphatically reject it, right? Do you want to imply Rumi's? Well, Rumi's been dead a long time, and I can't speak for him, but I think that he would say, I'm so unconcerned with that issue. Where's your spirit? Where do you love other people? Are you trying to help make this world a better place for others? Are you trying to have a spiritual connection? Are you dissolving your ego such that you feel that, that it's not your place to judge and condemn others, So that's kind of how I'm looking at this thing from a faith standpoint. From a faith standpoint, I believe freedom is essential and core to my understanding of myself as a Muslim.
When at the beginning of our davening, of our praying, whether in congregations or at homes or in our hearts, we recite Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzalmo. Praised are you, Adonai, who rules the universe for making me in the divine image. And when that bracha is recited in our shul, as it is in many shuls around this community, whether by a man or a woman, by a person who is straight or a person who is gay, they are embracing the truth of who they are, and this state has no right to deny them the dignity that they recite each and every morning when they get up to pray.
I struggled for weeks trying to figure out what's this hymn going to be about, and as they say, write about what you know. And I thought, okay, why am I doing this work? And I'm doing this work precisely so that the kids, the generations coming behind me, aren't going to have to go through what I went through growing up.
Some of you are Catholics, some of you come from other faith groups, perhaps no affiliation at all. We're really happy to have you. As Catholics, we're up against a lot of opposition, as you may know. So we want to create a message that there are Catholics out there who aren't afraid to speak their conscience and aren't afraid to speak out against this amendment and aren't afraid to speak up for all of us. Straight, GLBT, all of us together.
I've been doing this kind of pro-queer faith work for about the last 7 years. But up until then, I made my living in music, mostly musical theater. Throughout doing this work now, trying to find ways to kind of bring this other part of me and what I do into this work. The hymn is about protecting our kids, and our campaign is about marriage. That's all about family. Because the Roman Catholic Church is asserting itself so strongly in this campaign, there is such a power in Catholics speaking to other Catholics, and saying that there is not a monolithic voice within the Catholic Church, that you can be faithful and Catholic and oppose this amendment too. And he thought this would be a great tool, a way for these folks to gather in one place and to collectively say, we oppose this amendment not in spite of our faith, but precisely because of it.
This is a joint effort of people of faith. But as you know, there are some bishops out there who have a pretty strong voice, and there is quite a campaign underfoot. And we're here to say, you know what, there's another voice out here. It is the voice of the Good Shepherd.
Amen.
This video shoot was an opportunity for people of faith to get together in one room and to sing, raise their voices of conscience, and very publicly state their faith and how their faith inspires their stand on this issue. The spirit in that room, the day of our shoot, was remarkable. When we finished our final take, the room exploded in spontaneous cheers and tears and applause that went on for like 3 minutes, and it was just one of those mountaintop moments.
Anytime somebody wants to go toe-to-toe and talk about these Bible kind of bullet sorts of things, it doesn't work. And until we can see the whole sweep of grace and God's intention that we would live in fullness and in harmony one with the other without judging. Jesus says plenty about judging, lots and lots about judging, says zero about homosexuality. So if we can look at the meta-narrative and say, what does this have to say about how we relate to each other?
Jewish tradition teaches that there's the written Torah and the oral Torah. There's the Torah that is in the scroll, the 5 books of Moses, but there's also all the rabbinic commentary that comes later, all the conversations that come later. And after that, there's more commentary and more commentary. I mean, my bookshelves are full of taking every word, every phrase, every punctuation mark and dissecting it and exploring it. And so I guess what challenges me in this conversation is to say, why do we interpret every little bit? But we take one verse or 2 verses from the Torah and use these as an absolutism, not only to say we don't allow for gay marriage or we don't allow for talking about gay rights, but that we don't allow gay people to exist. Because that's not at all what Judaism is about.
There are 2 ways to see your faith. One is, I'm a member of this group and we do X, Y, Z, and we're against these people and we're better than those people and we condemn those people. My mother's like, look, we ain't worried about we'll let God decide who gets into heaven and who doesn't. For what we do here, we're gonna try to be good neighbors. So I was raised that way. Now, of course, I'm a Muslim, but the core values that I was raised with are the same values. Love thy neighbor is still how I try to live my life and what I teach my own kids. And I've had people who are Muslims say, Brother Keith, we're very concerned that you believe in civil rights for gays. And I'm like, well, how could I oppose civil rights for gays but stand for civil rights for you? I can't do it. It's inconsistent. It doesn't make no sense. I told them, when I talk about Islamophobia to members of Congress, and I talk to Barney Frank and Tammy Baldwin, openly gay members of Congress, and say, look, this Islamophobia is bad. Can you guys stand with me? They say, where do I sign? So what do I say when they come to me and say, this homophobia is killing us, literally. Can we do something about it? Will you stand with us? And I say, well, I can only stand with you. I have no other choice if I'm going to be anything approaching consistent.
The notion that women couldn't be rational actors, that's a core belief. If you look at what Paul has to say about women, it's clear that women are supposed to serve their husbands and they can't be trusted with any form of power. Is that belief at the essence of Christianity? I don't think so. I think that was a belief about women that was common, widespread, you could even say universal at the time. Paul picked it up, put it into his system. We now know that's not true. And whether that's science or personal experience, we know that it's not true, that what Paul said about women. And so we move past that as a way not of undermining religion, but of preserving it. I don't know anyone who says that it would have been better for the church to reject Copernicus and Galileo and stick with the idea that the earth is at the center of the universe. Right? At the time, you may recall, or students of history may recall, that was a pretty live debate, right? And there were folks in the church who argued that it's very important, and the penalty of death, people were put to death for saying that the earth wasn't the center of the universe. You know, as our scientific knowledge evolves, the church got it wrong then in the beginning. They just pardoned Galileo about 10 years ago, right? But eventually, our religious institutions catch up with it, and you know, that's for the better. You know, this is important too for sexuality, because a lot of folks say, well, what, you know, we've been wrong for 2,000 years. Now all of a sudden we know something. Well, yeah. What we know is the science. We know more about human sexuality. It's not that the church was wrong or that our religious laws were wrong. They weren't talking about something that we now understand.
The Bible in itself is contradictory, so you can basically look in the Bible and find whatever you want to support your viewpoint. It's a very reliable resource, actually, for better or for worse.
But you can also break down the verses surrounding homosexuality and realize that it's what people are saying.
To something not love related. It's not about two men or two women that are in love and are in a committed relationship together.
This like new interpretation of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it's hospitality issues, and unless it's totally off base about that, it's hospitality, not homosexuality issues. And so I feel like you need to interpret the Bible. Don't just be like, that's God's word for me today. Think about what you're reading, interpret it properly, maybe go back and do some Greek and Hebrew translations.
Yeah. And
that's how I feel about my Bible.
I think part of the connotations that came with it too is a lot of the original scriptures came from, you know, groups of people who weren't fans of homosexuality because they were small groups of people with closely concentrated religious beliefs. They wanted those beliefs not to die out, so they wanted to keep making children, and it's harder to make children with homosexual couples than it is with heterosexual couples.
Yeah, a lot of different people wrote the Bible, so there's going to be a lot of differing viewpoints in the Bible.
The Bible was written a long time ago, and I feel that it was people who wrote it. And things change over time. A lot of things have changed, so people's viewpoints back then will be different than what we now think now, because everything changes. So I feel that we can't just stick with what they have down in the Bible, but we have to go along with time, just like everything else has.
The living should not be governed by the dead, especially not those who have been dead for 2,000 years and who have been brought up in an entirely different climate than us. So I think that people using the Bible as an excuse to dislike homosexuality, it's kind of honestly for me, it just seems like a bit of a weak argument.
It was religious texts, for some reason, are used as weapons now, and that wasn't the way that they were supposed to be.
I've been a Lutheran, I've been raised a Lutheran, and I never thought anything was different or anything that was abnormal about two people like of the same sex being together. I've known Patrick my whole life, and I never thought anything was weird about his two-mom family until my church left, and it really made me think about like what does that mean and what do other people value. And I've realized that my biggest thing about why I love God is because God is love and he's supposed to love everybody, and to me it doesn't make sense that he loves everybody except the gays.
I got to sit here today at this event next to my parents who both grew up here, and next to the man who will become my husband in June. We're getting married. It's a really happy story, though there's some sadness to it. We're going to Toronto to get married because it's legal there. But I long for the day for our daughters, who are 8 and almost 5, to be able to come back and to be married in our sanctuary, or this one, should they fall in love with a nice Jewish man or woman.
I often say, you know, we have nieces and nephews who are 4, 6, and 8 on Obi's side, and they know us as uncles Obi and Javen, and they know that we're married, and they know we're husbands, and that's the language that their parents use to talk about our relationship. And they know what that means because they have lots of friends whose parents are married and their own parents are married and they're husband and wife. And those words carry meaning that they understand.
And there is no similar word in a civil union, like civil unionized,
And we use the word partner a lot in the LGBT community, which I see arguments on both sides for using that term, but to me, partner doesn't carry the same meaning that husband does. And marriage carries a whole set of meanings that civil unions or domestic partnerships or any other newfangled legal equivalent can't provide.
Marriage implies lifelong commitment, eternal vows, where civil unions seems to imply some sort of legal compromise in order to cobble together rights and responsibilities.
Some sort of contractual relationship.
When you have members of your church who are here every Sunday, who are raising children in your midst, who want to say before God and their community in the sanctuary, that is their church home, that they are marrying one another, is this something that you value as a pastor? Holy Lord, yes. So how long can you, Elizabeth McCauley, maintain your credentialed life in a body that says no? For me, that's a question. It would imply that the state has the power to grant us the ability to bless or not bless, and the state doesn't have that power. So what happens, that doesn't affect my sense of my ministry at all. It would break my heart on behalf of the state of Minnesota, and it would scare me plenty. But I'll continue to work with what I have and where I am to defeat the amendment.
In my Jewish community here at Shir Tikva, Rabbi Latz and myself made a policy where we would not act as agents of the state to officiate at marriages. We would act as agents of Judaism, and we do that for gay and straight couples. And we can do the same ceremony for any couple. But since we can't act as an agent of the state in the weddings for our gay couples, we decided we would not act as an agent of the state for our straight couples. And our couples still want to get married, and if they choose that they want to have statewide recognition, they can go down to the courthouse and do that. But I hope for the day when I can act as both an agent of the state and as an agent of Judaism for weddings, so that the people that I'm marrying not only get the sanctity of their wedding prescribed by Judaism, but they also can get the rights and responsibilities that they would get as legally married couples in the state.
This is why I adamantly oppose this marriage amendment, which narrowly defines who gets to marry who. I'm against it 100% because I think it violates an essential core concept of freedom in my view. And I think that in America, people should have liberty and should be able to make decisions. Like I said, up until 1968, there were 16 states that said that a black person and a white person couldn't be married to each other. And none of us today think that that makes any sense. But it was the law of the land only a short time ago within my lifetime. And I think that really at the end of the day, it's not for anyone to say who should marry who. It's a freedom of choice thing. So if the person who you happen to love and want to be with happens to be the same sex and gender as you, then I say God bless you and try to be happy as you can in this very difficult world.
How do you feel about this proposed amendment to make it where marriage on a state constitution level is only between a man and a woman? How do you feel about this amendment?
I think it's a waste of time. I think whoever is so uptight that they gotta make that their issue instead of feeding the poor or calling their mother, has got their priorities different, and I think they probably
I think it's all,
that
you
they're
know,
just
all
more
of those
afraid.
things are, yeah, they're based in
Based on
fear.
fear.
You know, they're afraid of losing something. I don't know what they think they're going to lose by gay people getting married. You know, it's really kind of based on a fear, and that's kind of such a primal thing, you can't really reason with it.
There was a document called the Family, A Proclamation to the World that the prophet, leaders of the church put out maybe 10, 15 years ago, and it was sort of a declaration, a sort of an open letter to the world declaring our views on family. And it does very specifically talk about marriage, you know, that the order of God and the order that we will return to God in is in our familial connections. And key to that would be the connection of the female and a male person. And it does very specifically say that, you know, marriage is between a man and a woman. There's no gay couples that are going to be married in the temple. Now, the other side of that being we are all children of God, and that I personally believe that people can build whatever relationships they want. They can make covenants with each other, and they can, you know, they can make commitments the way they see fit.
I think happiness lies into it too. You know, everybody has a right to be happy. And
Well,
if that,
the big thing is the government. Is the question is like, well, okay, it's one thing for a religion to believe that things are a certain way. It's another thing for them to then dictate everybody else like how things are done. It's another thing for them to dictate to the government what marriage is. You know, I think couples should be able to share benefits. They should be able to have grieving rights. They should be able to not be, they should be protected from being discriminated against. There's probably a place where it sort of looks like conflict, but it's sort of not. I mean, the church has never come out and told anybody how to vote. Anyone who says that they do really doesn't know what they're talking about, or it's hearsay. So, anyway, it's just not about, that's not what they're teaching, you know. When our leaders get up in front of us and speak, they're not talking about how, they're not dissing gay people, they're not doing those things, they're talking about uplifting each other and trying to live a life and trying to grow and see things as eternal. The church is made up of people, not angels. Gods.
people make mistakes.
People make mistakes. People have different perceptions of things,
and they're motivated by fear and many different factors, you know. If children are loved and nurtured, no matter who does it, they're going to grow up happy and healthy and productive. Kind of have a similar discussion. We just, the other week, I can't remember Hollis, our 12-year-old. She comes and she asks.
Wondering about gay people.
We just say, well, we believe that people of all walks of life, you know, deserve to be happy, to make their choices, to live with and love who they please. And, you know, I mean, for the first 2 years, we had a gay nanny, you know, and he was awesome.
With us.
You know, and
yeah, he was our tour nanny.
yeah.
So.
You know, so we tell her that, and we just say we love him and we love
everybody else, and then we try to explain to her why some people feel certain ways about things, and try to shed a little light on maybe that's not right, or maybe how she can find out for herself.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you tell them you'll love them, whoever they are, and whoever they love.
The whole church is about individual testimony. It's about every individual in the Mormon Church has gone to God themselves with concepts and tried to find out what the truth is themselves. Your religion's based on your own experience with God and your own search for truth.
Maybe that's the misconception that we're all kind of
we're all
one body kind of moving, shuffling along as the mob does, but I don't think that's necessarily fair.
I don't think Romney would be a good president. I don't think he has the right perspective. He's obviously hired a bunch of people who are completely
I'll tell you, I
out of touch.
voted for Obama, but I'm bummed. I wanted better. And I think that's across the board. So it's frustrating.
Yeah. I wish Huntsman would have stuck in there. That would have been a good Mormon.
But he's not really a practicing Mormon, I don't think. That's the best kind. No.
Are you either of you Catholic or?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay.
I used to be.
We grew up Catholic.
Yeah,
we
we
are
both-
no longer Catholic.
Yeah, we both grew up
Interesting.
very Catholic.
I have a lot of gay friends, and it hurts my soul. It really does. It hurts my soul to know that those people are not going to be given the rights that the rest of us have. My choices center on living out a life that embodies Christian values and embodies Catholic values in a way that represents my love and compassion for other people. And to me, there are a lot of Christians and a lot of Catholics in the world who don't embody that in their life every day. They say one thing, they do another. It's that kind of hypocrisy that drives a lot of people away from the Christian faith and Catholicism more specifically.
I think you can still remain a Catholic and be practicing and have those beliefs that I have. I just think that that's the right thing to do. As a Catholic, I don't think you should be discriminating against others. And so this is just one way that we have one segment of society that's treated different than others. I have certainly respect for, my parish priests as well as the bishop and the others. And, they have their dogma and their beliefs that not only that they carry personally, but, it's their job. It's what they're told to do. I don't feel how you can say that people of a certain skin color don't have to sit in the back of the bus, but yet you say that people of a certain sexual preference can't get married. To me, those are like issues, and I don't know how you can have a belief on one side but not believe it the other way. So.
I was raised a Catholic, very conservative, small town. And faith was very important and is very important to me and my family. We've undergone some pretty serious health issues in the last year. My husband and son both had cancer. And so faith has carried me through, definitely, and I've definitely become more involved in my church. Yet, maybe compared to older Catholics, I don't adhere to every tenet of the church, shall we say. And I believe a marriage consists of a loving partnership between two people. So you say, sure, why can't that involve people of the same gender? Yet, in my faith and in what I believe, a lot of heterosexual couples live together and don't get married. And do I believe that the gay and lesbian community, their rights, it's not fair that they don't have the same rights in a long-term relationship that a heterosexual married couple does? Do I agree with the fact that, it's a legal nightmare for them when they have to, contend with the death of maybe one partner and then, what happens to the house even though they've been together for 30 years.
You just mentioned the health issue with your husband, and they have, when they're not allowed to have the same access
to healthcare and even information, even though they're partners. And is that fair? No. But I am uncomfortable having an amendment regarding the issue.
Right. So, it sounds like you're supportive of same-sex couples.
I am, but I'm not supportive of them, and which sounds crazy as I'm, articulating this. It sounds crazy that I say, well, no, I don't think they should be able to be married.
maybe they should be, but I don't want there to have to be an amendment to I don't want the government involved in that quite as much.
It sounds like it's a real wrestling match for you.
It is, actually, because I just want everybody to be nice. Be nice to everybody and if nobody's hurting anybody then so be it. Life is short. Life is filled with a lot of horrible things. And so if somebody's in a happy relationship, who cares? So part of me says that, and then the Catholic part of me says, oh no, it can only be men and women. So I'm split down the middle, aren't I? And you just got this out of me right in this little interview right here.
How do you feel about same-sex couples who are already raising kids?
Fine. If there's two happy people raising happy, healthy kids, thank God.
They should be married? Or be allowed to marry if they want?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe in that case, obviously. Yeah. You're raising some really difficult questions here that I haven't really, articulated and thought about.
I've had people who tell me that they don't know anybody in Little Falls that's gay. And I said, really? I know some, and I've only been here for, a little over 2 years. And I think in some ways, in this neck of the woods, it's still sort of thought of as, oh, that's a somewhere else sort of a thing that's not here, and we don't need to talk about that. This church has for a very long time been known as the church that if no one else will marry you for whatever reason, you've been living together already, or you have kids, or you're divorced and have kids from another marriage, whatever it may be, First United will do that marriage, at least sort of in this neck of the woods. The churches are still institutions that people really look to when they're looking for moral insight, when they're asking questions about what's wrong and what's right. And if we say, we look at the scriptures and we sort of read through this, and what we find over and over again is Jesus emphasizing love. It's Jesus emphasizing welcome, Jesus emphasizing, and not only Jesus, but the prophetical witness in what we call the Older Testament, emphasizing a care for the ostracized, a care for the poor, a care for the foreigner, a care for those who are sort of on the margins of society. And that's where we need to be looking. And the biggest challenge really that we have in this area is to find folks who are willing to sort of say publicly, whether that be just within their families or even just within their circle of friends, to say, I'm voting no on this. Because it can be a intimidating thing to do, because this is a conservative area. I've been trying to gather together a group of folks from within Little Falls to talk about what can we do. How can we, at the very least, stand up and say, there are actually folks in this town that are going to vote no in November. And so then at least folks can see that and say, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that feels like this. I'm not the only one that sees the world this way.
As far as are people just using the Bible as a cloak for homophobia? Sure, some are. I actually don't think that's the main impetus. Religion is a lot deeper than that. Religion gives you a notion of order and of fundamental okayness, and it tells you kind of really the meaning of life. It goes for the big questions. There's a story that I like to tell of Tim LaHaye, who wrote the Left Behind series. It's an apocalyptic, very right-wing Christian series of books. He had a conversion experience when he was 10 years old when his father died. And at the funeral, the pastor said that Tim LaHaye's father is now in heaven with Jesus. And Tim LaHaye recounts this experience of knowing as a certainty that that was true, that there was heaven and that there was Jesus, his Father was with him. That's what's at stake in these debates, right? Tim LaHaye's sense of comfort about losing his father as a 10-year-old boy, that's really deep. And it's connected for him to a certain understanding of the Bible and of how the world works and of how things are. So when we talk about changing that understanding, we're threatening the very sense of okayness, the very sense that the world is ordered, that these people have. And so it's deeper than homophobia. It's not, I hate the gays, therefore I twist the Bible. It's, I'm part of an interpretive tradition that has understood things this way, and this is how the world makes sense. And if you change that, all hell breaks loose. And if you look at the rhetoric that comes out of the so-called Christian right, it's exactly that. If you change anything about what marriage means, civilization's going to fall apart. And sometimes folks on the left think that this is just so ridiculous. Like, how could anyone think that? You know, two men getting married is like the most banal thing in the world when you actually see it. How could you think that civilization is going to collapse? Well, yeah, their civilization, their notion that this is how it is, and it's always been this way, that is threatened. And so I think it's much deeper than homophobia.
I think the opposition speaks often from ignorance. If you don't ever experience a loving couple who shares a home, who shares a life, who may or not share children, you can't conceptualize what a gay marriage would look like. You only have bits and pieces of a story. You have a piece of text that talks about a man lying with a man, perhaps about a sexual act, perhaps about a piece of a larger story about non-consensual sex, and you use that, you apply that to a situation that you really know nothing about. And I think that's a big piece of what people are speaking out. They really don't have a context, they don't have a story. And because they're pushing people away from their own communities, they're not hearing those messages. So when they talk about someone who's gay, they're talking about someone in their mind who will have left traditional Judaism, because you can't be gay in a traditional Jewish community. They'll think of someone who is maybe not having monogamous relationships because that's the stories that they hear. They might hear about people who are cheating on their spouse because they were forced into a marriage when they were very young before they were able to come out. Then they come out and they're in a marriage, they're trying to honor that, but they're also sexual beings who are trying to explore their sexuality. And if they have those experiences as what they're hearing about, that's what they're seeing. And a lot of, quite frankly, lies. A lot of these fundamentalist religious groups are creating their own studies that are really fundamentally flawed. You know, one example is a study that Focus on the Family did where they interviewed sex offenders about their practice and assumed that anytime a man sexually abused another man or boy, that meant they were gay, and then used that to imply about gay men being pedophiles. These kind of really, array size of 3, things like that. That if they use that as their pedagogy, or other people just read it and take it as scholarly fact, they're not speaking from any knowledge. And I feel sad about that. I mean, it really makes me sad to think about people who are just so educated on so many things and so misinformed on this. And I think where we have powerful conversations is when we actually put down those obstacles and those barriers, and we have a frank conversation about what we think we're talking about. Because if those people saw the loving couples that I saw, if they think that marriage is about love and respect and honoring each other, I think they would see those things in the relationships that I see around me.
I have a men's Bible study on Wednesday mornings. The average age is probably 75, 80. One of our most beloved members, he has a niece who is a lesbian woman who he cannot imagine was created by God to be an abomination. And because he's in relationship with this niece and sees the beauty of her heart and her longing to connect with someone else in a partnership, he can see the grace that's there to be seen.
In the evangelical community, there's still a notion that, because there's a fundamental religious idea that you can change anything about yourself. And it's kind of the cornerstone of the sin and forgiveness redemption narrative. And so that narrative plays in to a notion that you can even change sexuality. We can have that conversation about biblical verses and biblical scriptures. But in order to get in the door, right, we have to actually show up as who we are. So no amount of Jay Michaelson's brilliant writings about Leviticus, Romans, and Corinthians has the same power as a lesbian couple coming to church every week and just being who they are. Because you see in your interaction with that with that couple in this case, you see that the myths that you've assimilated about what homosexuality means, those myths are false. And then you're open to have the next level of conversation.
I had a great conversation with my 28-year-old daughter, who's wildly enthusiastic about building a better world, full of hope. Asked her about why she wasn't coming to church. And what she said to me was one of the most heart-piercing and honest things that I've heard. And she said it with passion. She said, "Mom, when is the church going to step up?" And when she thinks of the church, she thinks of the voices that advocate for closing doors on full inclusion and community, and saying, no, you cannot marry your beloved because you're of the same gender, and no, 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 no. Instead of the yes, 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 who are you? Let's find each other and let's build something together. So to me, so what's so very important is that the church does step up and find other people across faith lines who feel that same passion and that same need, and who are tired of being silent.
I think if we lose, I'm worried about what that means for this generation and the next generation. I'm surrounded by young people who tell me this is a ridiculous issue. Of course, there should be marriage equality in the state of Minnesota. That's what they hope for the future. I have a group of young women in my congregation who started a petition for kids who are under 18 who won't be able to vote but wanted to make their voices heard. And what they want for Minnesota, for their generation when they grow up, if they want to get married, is marriage equality. And I think that what we're doing is we're creating a battle for them. And I feel bad as an adult creating a struggle for our kids, that they will know when they're 13 or 14 that when they grow up, they're going to have to fight this legislation and work even harder than we are now to create a change. And I don't think that's a legacy we want to leave behind for young people. The sad part is if we win, we're exactly where we are right now, in some ways. That we don't have marriage equality, and we're not going to have marriage equality at the end of this. In November, if we win, it means that we're going to have to start the next conversation, which is how do we bring marriage equality to Minnesota? I think that the work we'll do to win in November is going to help us with that next step, but it won't mean that it's already completed. I think we'll still have a lot of conversations to have, a lot of work to do.
We know that in less than a generation, marriage equality will be the law of the land, not just in Minnesota, but across the United States. We can just see the trajectory. So this is something that we're putting our hearts into stopping and participating in the longer historic movement. But we know where this is going to end. I mean, and as Christians, we know the ultimate destiny of human beings and of one another and of a relationship. It's to be united in love with one another and with God. So in light of those things, this is not a desperate thing. This is merely one of the things we need to get through in order to move on to where God is truly calling us.